Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of 219 Green Connect, where we explore topics about the environment and green living in Northwest Indiana. For past show archives, news, and upcoming events, you can check out our website at 219 Green Connect, or you can go to Facebook or Twitter to follow us there. Our ID on both of those sites is 219 Green Connect. You can also subscribe to our podcast via iTunes. Listeners to our live show today, March 26th, can phone in at 805-243-1323 to post questions or join the conversation. I am Kathy Sipple. I'm your host, and with me today I have wine expert and sommelier Simon Barrios. And let's see if I can get Simon on the line. Simon, are you with us today?
I am, Kathy. How are you?
Great. So glad to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here. I'm always happy to do two things, talk about myself and talk about wine and spirits. So today we get to do both.
That is an awesome way to start a week. Yeah,
Absolutely.
well, I should say I kind of borrowed you because I met you via our mutual friend Lauren Riga, who has an excellent radio show of her own, Sustainability 101 on WVLP, which I think you're still making frequent guest appearances there, correct?
Yes, I am. Yeah, it's a great show. Lauren is a powerful force in green concerns here in Northwest Indiana, and I'm happy to co-host with her and fill in, anything that I can add from my experience to what she's already doing.
Well, I definitely am a fan of wine and other other local beverages, and I have to say I didn't immediately think of that aspect of green living, but upon speaking to you and just saw how passionate you were about the commitment to local products, I thought what a great topic. Really wanted to have you here and just kind of let people know what some of the local options are. So what's going on, or what's new since the last time we've talked? What kind of exciting beverages are you seeing out there?
Well, we live in a great area for those of us who are both green conscious and are focused on supporting local entrepreneurs and producers of such. So we've got a combination of things. The craft beer movement just continues to blossom and thrive. We have a wonderful selection of local breweries within, short driving distance. Of course, we've got Figure 8 here in Valparaiso. We've got world famous Three Floyds. We have Bell's right there in Kalamazoo, which isn't so far away. We've got New Holland, and of course several fantastic breweries in Chicago and Lafayette, just outside of our quote unquote local circle. And for people who are maybe having a disconnect between how your alcohol choices can be part of your green lifestyle, it's pretty simple. Those products need to be trucked. They need to be moved around. So if you're, bringing in beers from very far away, basically what you're paying for is the gasoline cost of trucking the water that is part of that, and the weight of the glass and the cardboard from one part of the country to the other, when you have fantastic sources of liquid refreshments right here nearby. So like one of the things I do is the majority of my home beer consumption is from Figure 8, my local brewery. I pass by it all the time. I use growlers, and when I stop at the when I'm driving past and I know that my growler is empty, I stick it in the trunk. I take it in, I fill it up with fresh beer and bring it home. And that's a great way to keep my carbon footprint as low as possible when I have a thirst for beer. And then beyond the and also on top of that, it just makes an economic sense for these brewers to be using local products as well. It's cheaper for them to actually get them, and most of them are very acutely aware that they're supporting local entrepreneurs, local family-owned businesses as well, by their choices of who they're buying their malts from, who they're buying their hops from, et cetera. And then with spirits, we have this is the craft spirit movement is right behind craft beers. And craft beers are just red hot. I started in this industry about 7 years ago, and at that time, craft beer and imports was in most good liquor stores, let's say 16 to 20 feet of shelf space. Now I'm seeing 60, 80 shelf space because there's so much interest and such a demand for these unusual beers, these artisan beers. Mm-hmm. Well, right behind that wave is craft distilling, and as a matter of fact, quite a few of our craft brewers are also distilling.
Oh, really? Okay, did not realize that.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of that going on. The best example, two good examples locally, would be New Holland, which makes fantastic beers, and then they've also released a line of craft spirits. And they run the gamut from gins, vodkas, whiskeys, to some very unusual things, some very unique artisanal products that you wouldn't find from anybody else. For example, they make a beverage called Hopkila, which is basically a hopped white whiskey, but the overtones of it make it smell and taste like tequila, so they call it Hopkila, though there's no agave in it. And
I'm sorry, who makes that? That's from...
That is New Holland. New
Holland. Okay, great.
Yeah, which is a short trip. Quite a few of us, summer and relax in southern Michigan, and that's another a great nearby entrepreneur that we could be supporting. And then you also have the Round Barn. The Round Barn started off as just wine, and now they're making beers. They're making, pardon me, they're making vodka, and a myriad of different liqueurs and small batch craft spirits as well. So there's another one.
Yeah, that's true. I have tried that vodka. I think it's called, is it Divine or something like that?
Yes, okay. Exactly, because it's grape-based, which, is fantastic. They're using what they have,
right.
which is absolutely fantastic. They're using what they have. They're not wasting any of their products, and they're satisfying a need, a thirst, if you would, in the marketplace.
No pun intended, I'm sure.
No pun intended. And then, craft distilling just absolutely keeps blossoming. There's two excellent craft distillers in Chicago, Koval, which is up in the Ravenswood neighborhood, and then North Shore, which makes beautiful products as well. And one of the things that is very interesting about these guys is that they realize that they're not going to compete with the $10 bottle of hooch from wherever at the local liquor store. They're focusing on very high quality and unique products. If you just took some time to go to either one of their websites, you would find a myriad of things that you may not be familiar with, in addition to vodkas and whiskeys and liqueurs that there are a plethora of on the liquor store shelf. You'll find some really great local alternatives as well as a creative. And then moving here into our more local facility, we have Journeyman, which is right there in Three Oaks, Michigan, about an hour outside of Valparaiso, where we are today. And they do an outstanding job as well. And again, they are making spirits that you would recognize, like vodka and gin, and they're doing an outstanding job of creating a line of artisanal whiskeys that are a little bit different than what you typically would find from your mass producer of inexpensive of alcohol. So it's it really is. This is becoming the golden age. I wouldn't say it's a golden age yet of local spirits and availability of local spirits. And then of course there's wine. And for quite a few people, they absolutely love the wines of Michigan. And there's some decent wines coming out of Indiana as well, especially when you're looking at dessert wines, or if you have a sweet tooth and like sweet wines. And the same thing goes with Ohio. There's some beautiful wines coming out of the Ohio River Valley as well. And they're not all, I think the knock on a lot of the local Midwestern wines is that they're all sweet, or they're made out of what we call fox grapes, like Concord and Catawba and things like that. They're called that because their detractors believe that they have a foxy aroma or soapy aroma to them, but they're incredibly popular. The number one wine here in Indiana is the Oliver Soft Red, which is made out of mostly Concord, if I remember correctly, and it trumps every other wine, no matter what varietal it might be, in our local market. And there's lots of other fun things to enjoy. Now, will we ever be as great a wine growing area as Tuscany or Napa Valley or Bordeaux, France? Maybe not, But I think that as that culture and that science progresses, we're going to find viticulturalists and winemakers who hit home runs and find the right terroir for the grapes that they want to grow, and hopefully eventually we'll have enough of a variety of varietals that every wine drinker can find something local that they're going to really enjoy.
What do you feel about maybe a not so sweet red, a little bit on the drier side for a local wine?
Well, there's a couple of wines that I've had that I enjoy. Finn Valley in Michigan makes a delicious Cabernet Franc, and most people are not familiar with Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc is a vitivinifera varietal, that is the genus and species, which is the same genus and species as the grapes that we're all familiar with for winemaking, such as Chardonnay, Cabernet, Pinot Noir, etc. Its ancestral homes are Bordeaux, where it is third fiddle in what we call the left bank, which is basically the western side of Bordeaux, where it plays a counterbalance to Cabernet Sauvignon, which is its offspring, and Merlot. And then in the right bank, which is the eastern side of Bordeaux, actually plays a very important role. And although it is number 2 in plantings in what we call the right bank, many of the viticulturists are increasing their plantings of Cabernet Franc mainly because of global warming. It's been warm enough now to ripen the grape, whereas before many of the viticulturists thought that they could not hit consistently high enough temperatures to thoroughly ripen Cabernet Franc. Now they're finding that they can consistently ripen it. So much of the Merlot that was planted in areas that weren't necessarily as well suited for Merlot are now being replaced with Cabernet Franc. So the grape is ancient. It's like I said, it is one of the parents of Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Sauvignon was a wild cross-pollination between Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. So it makes a beautiful, dry, crisp, citrusy white wine. So thank you, Cabernet Franc, for bringing us your wonderful child, Sauvignon.
Yeah, this is interesting.
Well, yeah, it's a dark red wine that typically makes a medium to full-bodied red wine with medium to high tannins. Its flavor profile is similar to Cabernet Sauvignon, but it does vary in certain ways. So for example, where the textbooks would say for most Cabernet Sauvignons that you have, you'll always find currant, blackberry, and hints of tobacco and pepper in the wine. In Cabernet Franc, you will find the currant and blackberry flavors and maybe a little more of black cherry flavors as well. But it typically has a distinctive mintiness or an aroma of green peppers. Depending on how ripe the grapes got or what ripeness they achieved, you will have varying degrees of mintiness or the sweet peppers. So, as I said, Bordeaux is one of its ancestral homes. Its other ancestral home is one of my favorite wines called Chinon, and Chinon is an appellation that is in the Loire River Valley. Now, the Cabernet Franc based wines or Cabernet Franc blends from Bordeaux and Chinon are very different. If you blind tasted a Chinon, to most people, they would confuse them with Pinot Noir. Maybe they would say, wow, this is the biggest Pinot Noir I've ever had. They are a little bit lighter in body and color than the Bordeaux versions of Cabernet Franc. They still hold that mintiness, which I find most Pinot Noirs also share. They'll have that beautiful green pepper flavor. But the wines shimmer more in the mouth. They have a lighter body to them than most Cabernet Sauvignons or Cabernet Franc Merlot blends from Bordeaux. And they make an outstanding pairing with lighter meals, or let's say the types of meals that most people consider too light to match with Cabernet Sauvignon. So if you are looking for the flavor of the Cabernet family, but you're having a more delicate meal, Cabernet Franc is a fantastic complement to those types of meals. And the reason why I'm waxing on and on and on and on about the origins of Cabernet Franc is that I wanted to point out that the majority of the Cabernet Francs that I've had from Michigan resemble the Chinon more so than they do the wines of Bordeaux.
Well, so, I love that you're sharing all this background, because I think it just, informs someone what to look for when you go into the experience.
Absolutely.
You're not giving it away. It's not a plot spoiler, but it definitely prepares you to understand it on a different level.
Absolutely, and I find it helps. When I'm analyzing wines, the first two things I'm thinking about are varietal correctness and appellation correctness. Now, because Cabernet Franc is a French grape, but we also find it grown all over the world, from Chile and Washington and California. When I'm tasting those wines, I'm judging them based on my experience with the varietals and with the varietal in other appellations, specifically Bordeaux and Chinon. There's also a little bit grown in eastern Italy in one of my favorite regions, Friulano, and those wines are absolutely delicious. I find them to be, again, more in tune with the style of Chinon, which is Chinon, for those of you playing at home.
Thank you.
But they're absolutely delicious. And one of the reasons why I want to talk more, or I wanted to talk about Cabernet Franc, is that it appears that is one of the grapes that can be grown successfully here in the Midwest. And
Great.
I would love people to explore that variety in the same way that Riesling seems to be a grape that grows very well. There's some amazing Rieslings coming from Michigan, and they're not all sweet, gulpable wines. Riesling is a very noble variety and makes deliciously complex wines, and when the winemaker chooses to make a drier style of Riesling, I find those to be some of the most satisfying accompaniments to food at the table. So you'll find them from Black Star Farms. You'll find them from all over Michigan, and you just have to ask what your local wine shop, or if you're visiting there as well, just ask them, do you have a drier style Riesling? And most of them do. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit. Riesling is one of those varieties that is amazingly popular in the general market, but it has, most people, we ask them about Riesling, they're going to say, oh yeah, that's the sweet wine. Well, sweetness isn't necessarily a characteristic of the varietal itself. That's more of a cultural thing. Riesling has known for having a lot of acidity. Even in very, very warm, ripe years, the grape still has a lot of acidity, a lot of crispness, which makes it fantastic with food. Culturally and stylistically, most winemakers try to balance that acidity with a lot of residual sugar, which is a sweet wine. Okay, so let's back up a little bit and talk about the biochemistry of wine. So, fruit juice has a lot of sugar in it. Grape juice has a lot of sugar in it. The process of fermentation is where yeast eats the sugar to create alcohol, carbon dioxide, and a small amount of heat. Now, it is a decision of the winemaker when fermentation is stopped. So the winemaker can choose to ferment the wine completely dry if they choose so, but typically they are going to leave it a bit sweet. Now, the way to tell, let's say there's no one there to help you and you're looking at this bottle of Riesling, is I always look at the alcohol level. 10.5 seems to be the midway point between sweet and dry. So if I see a wine that has 10.5% alcohol or less, I'm going to assume that it's semi-sweet to sweet. If it's 10.5 degrees of alcohol or more, I'm going to assume that it's semi-sweet to dry. The higher the alcohol level, the drier the Riesling will be. Now, all of those gorgeous roasted apple, golden apple, raisin, and lemon flavors that you get from a fantastic Riesling, when they are vinified dry, they shine even more. They're not hidden behind that wall of sweetness that attacks your palate up front. And the natural acidity of the grape is a little bit more pronounced because there's no sugar there to balance it out, and it makes it a fantastic accompaniment to food. So, for example, I absolutely love Riesling with pork loin. Most people think, like, what? That's red meat, and white wine. How can you do that? Like, it is a fantastic compliment.
You've got me. I would try that.
Yeah. most people gravitate towards apples and pears in their pork preparations, which is fantastic with the Riesling. The only thing I wouldn't do is I wouldn't aggressively season the pork. I would use more delicate herbs, rosemary, tarragon, mint, things like that, to accompany the Riesling. I also wouldn't get too aggressive with the side dishes. Some brown rice would be beautiful. Some couscous, buttered noodles, spätzle, things like that would be a wonderful accompaniment. Maybe nothing too intense, too spicy, or too dark in flavor.
It sounds like marvelous comfort food.
Absolutely. And then we have some other interesting things going on here in local wine. So, for example, I mentioned earlier that there are these grapes that we call the fox grapes. Now, the grapes that we most talk about are the vitivinifera grapes, and there's another genus of species that are turned into wine, but mostly jams and grape juice, and that is the Viti Lambrusco, not to be confused with Lambrusca, which is a type of wine in a region in Italy which makes a semi-sweet, frothy, light red wine. The Viti Lambrusco are the genus and species of grapes that were found growing wild here in North America. Okay, and these are what we call the fox grapes. Okay, so the most famous of the fox grapes are Concord and Catawba. Thomas Jefferson thought that Catawba was going to make the great American wine. I've yet to see the great American wine made out of Catawba, but I hope people keep trying because it is a great. And then there have been a couple of instances, both biologically based and both emergency based, where viticulturalists hybridized these two species of grapes. Okay, so one of those reasons was in the early and mid 19th century there was an epidemic of a grape louse called the phylloxera. It's basically like lice that lived underground and would eat the cilia or the hair that the grapevine root uses to absorb nutrients. Now, the phylloxera bug devastated the vineyards in Europe. Well, it turns out that the phylloxera bug had no interest in the rootstock of the Viti Lambrusco species. So what they found is that by grafting the vines from Viti vinifera onto the rootstock of Viti Lambrusco, they were able to revitalize the European grape growing industries and survive, and basically be able to grow their grapes in soil that was infested with this bug. Okay. Now, throughout the world where the climates were not perfect for growing Viti vinifera, mankind, as they will, tried to force it. Okay, so one of those things was the hybridization of these two different species of grapes, and it has given rise to quite a few absolutely delicious grapes. Typically, they were done for this was done for climatic reasons, biological reasons. So just the Viti vinifera would not survive in the types of environments that we were trying to grow them in, but we could grow the Viti Lambrusco. So they hybridized them together to create these grapes. A great example of this is Chambourcin. And Chambourcin is a grape that does grow well here in the Midwest and makes some absolutely delicious wines. Now, so Chambourcin is a medium-bodied red wine. It is typically made in a semi-dry to dry style. Its aroma is similar to Pinot Noir, perhaps with a bit more of a floral note to it. Its body typically is about the same as a middle-tier Merlot. It is typically medium in acid to low in acid, and it can make an absolutely fantastic wine. Also, rosés of Chambourcin are fantastic, and you'll find those in both sweet version, semi-sweet, semi-dry, and I've had rye Chambourcin rosés, which were fantastic and a perfect complement to let's say pink meats like ham and shrimp and salmon and tuna.
That sounds
things like
very
that.
interesting. I've tried that.
It is.
How do you say it? Chambourcin? Is that the correct?
Chambourcin, yes. CHAMBOURCIN.
Yeah, I have tried one of those at Butler. Butler has a wine tasting facility in Chesterton. Not sure if you've been there, but they had a very nice one. I've tried several up in Door County, Wisconsin as well, where I travel somewhat frequently. But yeah, I found that to be a very, very nice, like you said, kind of stand-in for Pinot Noir, which that's about one of my favorites. But this rye, I'm very fascinated with this. Who is making that?
Well, you'll find a couple from here in Indiana and Ohio. So, like for example, the Creek Bend just outside of Bloomington, Indiana, has an outstanding dry Chambourcin Rosé, which I absolutely love. And this is a wine that goes very well with game birds such as turkey or pheasant, duck, or even just simple roasted chickens would be fantastic with the Chambourcin dry rosés. And as a matter of fact, a few years ago, Creek Bend actually won a prestigious award in a contest in France against the French dry rosés, because the French are famous for the dry rosés, especially from the south of France. And so it was interesting to see that the Indiana upstart went to France and kicked some butt.
Amazing. I know. When you think of rosé, I'm going to show my age here, but I think of, back 20, 30 years ago, and it was a kind of pinkish, not very good, very sweet. But I think you're saying the same thing with the Riesling. It doesn't have to be that way. I mean, the rosé can be something absolutely marvelous and mature and, not embarrassing to drink. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember a few years ago, I've been a big fan of dry rosés since I was introduced to them because they are fantastic complements to food. I remember I was in a restaurant in Chicago. It was Bistro Margot, very nice French restaurant, and the table that was next to us had been seated before us, and they were already in their appetizers by the time we sat down. And I looked at their wine choice, and in their ice bucket they had a bottle of dry rosé de Bandol. It was from Bandol, which is basically in the Provence area. Well, I was just at the part of the meal where I was looking through the wine list to choose something for our meal, and it was August, and so it was very warm out, and I was looking for a crisp, dry white wine to quench our thirst as an aperitif, and I happened to find that Bandol in the wine list, and it was $80. And I subsequently did some research on that wine and realized that was fair market value in a restaurant for that wine.
Wow.
It wasn't a mistake or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, one day we will have a market in local market for dry rosés of that value.
Wow.
They are absolutely fantastic. Now, they're not all going to be that expensive. The majority of them are going to be retail under $20, restaurants under $30. And will make a fantastic complement to a hot day, to simple foods. People always ask me, what do you drink with, as I said before, what do you drink with pink wine? Well, pink food. Raspberries.
Ham?
Good hams. Yeah, good hams. There's some fantastic local producers of ham and charcuterie and whatnot that are absolutely delicious. And then obviously you've got your options such as jamón ibérico from Spain, and you have prosciutto from Italy, all are fantastic with the dry rosé wine.
Well, Simon, you're a wealth of information. I know since meeting you, you've invited me to several really interesting events, many of which have not been able to attend just yet. But how can people find out about what's going on, in the region with different tastings and events? Do you have any way that people can get news updates from you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, at Facebook, I have Northwest Indiana Winers and Diners. You don't have to friend me personally to be a member of the group. Just ask for permission to join, and I will be happy to accept you. I have typically one or two events going on a week, and sometimes they're as simple as free in-store liquor spirit tastings in liquor stores, and I'm typically there for 2.5 hours, and just come up. I'm usually standing behind a little counter with some little glasses and, have a sample of what I'm offering. And sometimes it's cocktails that I've made, and sometimes it's a selection of wines that I've chosen. And then they can be as simple as that to as complex as a 7-course meal paired, by the chef and myself with specific wines to match them. So, for example, right now I have 8 more wines.
Simon, you know what? I have to tell you, we're almost out of time, so we might have to post a link to that on the Facebook page. I don't want to have you start into a really interesting story and then have to cut you off. So I'd love to invite you back.
I'm good at carrying on.
If you're just joining us now, we're almost at the end of our time, but this has been 219 Green Connect, and I'm Kathy Sipple, your host. Please join us tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Simon.